Well, listen, good morning, everybody, and welcome to this morning's webinar. We are having some technical problems, unfortunately. Penny is trying to log in. I'm assuming that she's on a sort of slightly difficult home-based connection in the darkest reaches of Devon, and we're trying to work our way through this. Can I just check that you can hear me all right? Because it's kind of rather odd to be sitting here in glorious kind of isolation and speaking to you. So if you could put a chat perhaps onto the public board, that would be great. So she's going to call in, I think. I think we're going to be doing something slightly different. And that is, she's going to call in by phone, and hello, well done. Let me just put you up.
Next slide. I can see you.
Brilliant. Can I just ask you? Can you hear? Oh, lovely to hear you. Can you hear Penny? Do you want to say a couple of words?
Yeah. Testing 1, 2, 3, 4. Can you hear?
Can you hear down the other side and other end of this? Ah, can hear. Brilliant.
We're going to have to do it like this, I think.
So this is always good to do these slightly unusual ways of organising webinars. So I'm really very pleased to welcome Penny to this webinar. She grew up in North London, has been involved heavily in scientific research since the sixth form, read natural sciences at Cambridge, sponsored by British Gas, did solid oxide fuel cells, and then joined the Ministry of Defence in 1993, did a whole load of interesting stuff. I'm looking novel armours, explosive trials, electrically powered armour, and basically moved up through the Defence Science and Technology Laboratory and eventually leading DSTL's Physics Laboratory department. Then she became head of Cyber and Information and became visiting professor. So she's eventually became acting chief technology officer. So she's a really experienced scientist, engineer, manager, and was appointed the first female chief executive officer at the Met Office in 2018, and is the UK representative at the World Meteorological Congress. So she's interested in innovation and IP, and loves singing, and is married and now lives in Devon, where I think you've been, what, for 9 months, a year?
Yes, I've been in this house nearly a year now, Sally, and that's part of the problem, because I love being in the depths of the country, but I have really terrible home broadband, which there's no way to fix, because we've tried all of it at the Met Office, so hence the delay. But I'm hoping you can hear me. There is a lag. I'm still watching you finish your sentence to me. I think you've just stopped, but no doubt you'll catch up in due course. So therefore, there'll also be a lag from when other people see the slides and when I do. But I think we should give it a go.
I think we should as well.
Great. So if you're ready, I will take it away, and you might as well click the next slide, and we'll go from there.
Shall I click? I'll click now then.
Yes, please. So I'll say very nice to sort of meet the people. I'm sorry I can't meet them more or entirely see who's there, but I can see things typed in the chat, so I can get questions that way. And what I intended to do was talk a little bit through the journey we've been on through the whole of the COVID experience in the Met Office. Some of it from what I hope will be of interest to all of you for just how you keep the business going and the decisions we've made for people, and some of it around the things that were specific to us. But I did stick up, first of all, our purpose and vision, because that's what we're here to do, and that's what we needed to continue to be able to do throughout this process. So if we weren't there helping people make better decisions to stay safe and thrive, especially at this time when there were other threats to their well-being, and if we weren't globally leading in weather and climate science and services, then we weren't doing our job. And the next slide, if Sally would go to that, just says something about the scale of what I was trying to manage. So while I wait for it to come up, all it's saying is that I'm dealing with a business of about 2,000 people, about £250 million turnover, and it's not just delivering the forecasts. About a third of my people are doing the fundamental scientific research. A significant amount of our resource goes on maintaining the very complex, huge data and supercomputer that enables the forecast to be delivered. And then I've got the people out with customers or in the what would have been in the extra HQ, delivering the forecasting services. And obviously I've got like everybody else, I have the people doing our finance, our property, and many of them have been extra busy keeping the business going. Next slide, please, Sally. I'll try to remember to say that early. So I've stepped us through a process of what happened before, at the beginning of the epidemic, the middle, and the future. And on the before side, I think it would be fair to say, I came, as Sally said, to the Met Office from Porton Down, where I thought we were pretty good at crisis management and resilience, because we had a fair amount to do even before the Salisbury incident, which I was there for. The Met Office, before I got there, was really good at this. And I think the reason for that is because weather actually throws you crises regularly, whereas most people hope never to use their crisis management in the Met Office. It's something we know we will use during big snow events or big heat waves. So we already had the established management process. We had that gold, silver, bronze critical command structure set up. We did the good practice stuff like regularly exercising our different teams. It was a bit lucky, but not entirely lucky, that we exercised our pandemic flu plan in full, the full gold level exercise in July last year, not long after I arrived. So we were in reasonably good shape. We've been moving our business towards a remote working Office 365 business. And I claim a little credit, having worked at Porton Down. I know a bit more about epidemiology than your average physicist. I looked at the stats out of China in the new year and said, I really don't like the look of this. This might be the global pandemic we've all been waiting for. I actually knew what our number was before everybody else. And so we started putting that plan into exercise really early on. We made sure we rolled out 200 laptops between January and March to our forecasters. We bought up all the hand sanitizer and wipes before everybody else could. So we were reasonably well prepped. And then we had planned, so then we ceased to be so far ahead of the game, we'd planned a full test of working from home, apart from our critical forecasters on March the 18th. We'd already done a sort of 50% test. And on March the 17th, Boris sent us all home, and there we've stayed ever since. Then we did the test on the day we planned to do, and then we stayed there. And throughout that process, we prioritised two things, which were making sure our critical to life services got out to our customers and the well-being of our staff, and that meant that other things had to give. Next slide, please. So from that very beginning, we were working with about 98 to 99% of people home. So we only had about 20 people in the building. Those people were security, cleaning, people wrangling the supercomputer, and it wasn't always the same 20, and a very few senior forecasters. And up front, we had some things to work out around, are we key workers? Mostly not. Who isn't? They need permission to travel so they don't get done by the police for breaking lockdown. we put a lot of effort into getting people's display screen equipment delivered to home. We considered various options, but in the end, we put monitors and really chairs in vans and drove them to people. The local ones we did ourselves, the further ones we couriered. We realised very early on that the staff very much valued that everybody was out of their beds from me downwards and in unfamiliar circumstances, and they wanted that communication. And so we did something which was a weekly Tuesday morning brief from me, followed by a live 20-minute question and answer on our work social media with all the executives, and that's proved immensely popular, and in fact much more popular than the briefings that we did face-to-face standing on stages before, and we intend to keep that going, though I have just dropped it to fortnightly because it's quite demanding on the exec and the comms, and the battle rhythm slowed down a bit in how fast things are changing. And very early on, two other things became clear, one of which was I needed to set priorities for people so they understood that they weren't expected to do everything and couldn't, and what came first. That included all our main strategy actions and everything else. And the other was we were getting lots and lots of bright ideas from across government and within the Met Office on things we could do to support with modelling, and we needed to have one picture of those and not have different people competitively modelling the same thing because they hadn't spoken to each other from across my business. So we put the modelling support group in place. Next slide, please. So that first step was really, gosh, can we operate this first tool? And it went extremely smoothly, and we really didn't expect it to be as easy as it was. And we very quickly demonstrated that we could continue to forecast from home. So then we went on to, well, two things really. A bit about, well, what happens next then? How do we establish this as our new routine? But also some specific challenges that we came about. So one was all our assumptions about air quality became wrong. So we have a good sophisticated air quality model based on the mix of gases you expect to see in the atmosphere, and that mix changed because people weren't driving or flying, which meant that we would have been forecasting bad air quality when there wasn't any. We did that in two stages. We did a sort of a quick bodge to cut source terms down a bit so that we didn't give false alarms, followed by a much better reanalysis and redoing our algorithm so that it was more flexible for different amounts of transport on the road, but that took a little longer. And the other thing which you may not even have thought about is, as well as using income from our aviation clients, actually aircraft fly around with our sensors on telling us about the state of the atmosphere, and we lost 80% of that data overnight, which means that our actual observations that initialise our model weren't as good as they usually are. And a private satellite firm who'd been wanting our business for a long time offered us their data for free on a trial basis to see if that could replace it. And that actually is a big undertaking to ingest a new source of data and characterise it. But we were able to be agile, and eventually we got that state stream going about June, and that's been very good. And from their point of view, will enable them to know that we've set a value on that and hopefully be able to sell it more widely going forward, which I think is why they did it. And at the same time, we thought about the sort of returning phases, interim, transition, future normal. Interim being the bare minimum, transition being the point where maybe which we still haven't reached, we're still in an interim phase where we hoped that we would be able to return to the building but socially distanced, and a future normal where in principle we could go back to everything how it was before, but we probably wouldn't want to, and what would we want to do instead, and what would our staff want. And again, going back into the building, we said that the main things being people's well-being and productivity. And in the interim phase where we are now, we've brought back about 60 people on those two bases. So either they've got a job that they couldn't do from home and there were some, we have some lab workers, we have the people maintaining observations networks, or like me, they had terrible home broadband, or they had physical or psychological health reasons why it was particularly difficult to be at home. So those are the people who are back in at the moment under a very strict COVID secure, distance, one-way system, sanitised regime that we would expect. Next slide, please. And that bit's been going very well. People have been grateful to be back in. We've been doing some blogs about what they've been doing so that the rest of people can see the workplace. And now we're really moving on to think We've already put a couple of teams on this. The usual suspects are those people who've actually helped us step down from the office in such good form, who will think about all the legal and compliance and knock-on effects very thoroughly, and the disruptors who are generally a bit earlier career, but are prepared to think more outside the box. And we've taken some first ideas from them about what we would be wanting to look at. How many do we want to come back to the office at all? Do we want the office to look different? Do we want different people with? That work is still finding its way. What we can already say is it's unlikely we would return to our shiny, lovely office at the same occupancy density that we previously did, because everybody's found they can do more from home and remotely than they thought. And we're also very committed to our net zero, so we're quite keen on reducing the travel if we don't need to. And that means that we may be interested in people who are looking perhaps to occupy a part of our building in partnership with us. So that's something that I thought people on this call might be interested in going forward. I've only got one more slide, and it's around the other things we've been doing in parallel to our keeping the office running and thinking about the future, and that's the work we've been doing in support of the epidemic. And I don't know if Sally's clicked it or not, but I'm hoping it's going to appear any minute. Because once we worried about maintaining our own forecasts, we were very much aware that we had other big data and modelling capabilities that were useful to the rest of government. And this is just a few highlights of the things we've been doing. One of the things we early did from the informatics lab on the science park was to make all our global climate data freely available to researchers around the world who wanted to look at the correlation between the weather and climate and COVID transmission. Some of the key epidemiological models which are informing the government were running on University College London supercomputer, taking 11 hours for a run, and we wrangled them onto our experimental cluster. That isn't even our main computer, where they ran in 1 hour for a run, which obviously makes a huge difference to you could do several runs in a day and make better decisions as a result of having seen several options. In collaboration with the Department for International Development and the World Meteorological Organization, we were asked if we would make our monthly outlook of the global forecast available more widely, because when food security is already very bad, then having a better idea about what crops to plant and what the new hazards might be is helping keep people alive around the world. We diverted more of our supercomputer capacity to look at different sorts of distributed computing. And most recently, we had a big part to play into that SAGE committee you've all read about that came out with the grim answers about there could be 120,000 more deaths in a reasonable worst case. But some of that was us feeding in for what the winter forecast might be and how COVID hazards might interact with other winter hazards. So that was the whole of my slides. Now we'll do the next challenging bit, which is, can I hear or see your questions? So thank you. I hope you could hear okay. I could certainly see Sally in the slides okay, so that was promising. I'm sorry I bothered putting on the spectacle clothes and makeup though, but I assure you I did.
Penny, thank you very much indeed. So we'll take questions, but I'm going to put my first question to you, if I may. So you must be one of the few companies that has done the sort of the pandemic test in advance. How did reality match the test?
Some bits did and some bits didn't. So the bit that we completely failed to foresee, and I think everybody did, was the being sent home for months. So we absolutely got you'll need the hygiene bit. We got you'll need the remote working capabilities, but we were thinking in terms of you might get some people ill in the Met Office and then you'll have to send their colleagues home because their office is infectious. We weren't thinking about you will all go home for months on end. We did think a bit about the sort of psychological and well-being impact. So it's not just keeping the work going, it's also about everybody's frightened and stressed and worried. And we did think about schools closing and things like that. So I would say we got 75% of the way, and certainly some of the preparations we made as a result were positive, but we didn't get the whole thing right.
That sounds pretty successful, really.
I'm really glad we did it. We would not have been able to deliver as much of our forecasting load. I think it's worth saying we have not failed to deliver any product. The only products we haven't delivered are ones that the customers haven't wanted. So we haven't had on-site forecasting at Gatwick. We haven't provided forecasters for Wimbledon and the Open. That's because those haven't happened. It's not because we couldn't manage it with the capacity. So we are quite pleased with ourselves in the amount of business continuity we succeeded in doing.
Wow. And so government and co must have been really rather thrilled that you had a bit of spare supercomputer capacity.
Our compute is so vast that 1% of it will deal with most people's modelling issues. And having come from mod, where I thought we dealt with big data, that office data is just several orders of magnitude bigger than nearly everybody else's. So it doesn't take too much of our capacity to make a big difference to other people's problems.
Yeah, and the comments that you made about having to suddenly bring the satellite data on because you weren't getting the aircraft data, that must have a similar sort of impact going forward as we come out of all of this and people start flying and driving and everything else. Are you going to have to readjust your algorithms?
We won't have to adjust the algorithms for the data assimilation. At some point, no doubt the free trial of satellite data will end, and then I expect the satellite firm will come to the European meteorological services and go see how useful this was. And basically, our findings are it has more or less offset the loss of aviation data. The aviation data is already stepping back up, so I think we're back up to about 50% of least European flights now. So we're seeing that come back in, but we were able to see it isn't a vast difference. It made about losing the aviation data cost us about 5% of our forecasting skill, and replacing satellite data roughly put it back again. So it was noticeable, and it's like 6 months improvement in our research, but it wasn't catastrophic. And we certainly didn't. In fact, what made a much bigger difference was the change in weather conditions. So that blocking high that came in when all the lovely weather came just as we were all told to stay home, that's the most difficult sort of conditions to forecast. And we noticed a bigger drop in skill because it's difficult weather than we did because of the change of data source. Right.
So as you said, you're leading nearly 2,000 people, £230 million, and from the end of a fairly sort of narrow broadband link, from the sounds of it.
You are so right. I'm one of the worst in the Met Office.
And I wonder how all that's worked for you.
I've certainly had some frustrations with it. It probably has been the most difficult thing. So when my staff are sort of complaining about I'm sitting at the kitchen table or I'm in the spare room or whatever, so am I. I mean, even though I have plenty of space in the house, I do quite a few teleconferences with my feet on the modem because I get the best signal. This has actually been, this particular software has been the most demanding. It's the only thing I've had that really hasn't worked. It's more been the odd dropout.
Right.
And the office support has put some time to see what they can do, and the answer is there really isn't anything. There's no data in my area. There's no fast fibre, and I could buy satellite broadband, but that is laggy, so it would give me faster upload, but it wouldn't actually help with all the teleconferencing I do. Having said that, we've made it work. I've only been into the office once, and that was to test out the COVID secure environment. Although if I'd realised how this was going to pan out today, I would have gone in again.
We've had a question saying, really interesting presentation. If we have a second wave and have to look at remote working again, is there anything the Met Office would do differently a second time? She's just interested to know more about any lessons learned.
That's a really brilliant question, and we're just sort of working our way through a lessons learned exercise now. We differed around a bit with how we were going to get people's DSE to them. Mm-hmm. So we thought, oh, would it be better if we let them come and collect it? And then we changed our mind, and we didn't expect people to be at home so long. So we started with some fairly restrictive things on, we're not going to pay for you to have anything, and then we have eventually gone, oh, you can have £50 to buy a desk or to look towards a desk or whatever. So I think if we could have looked ahead and gone, no, people are going to be at home for months, we'd have done some Exeter. We, like everybody else, we thought, well, will it be 3 weeks? Will it be 6 weeks? Will it be 2 months? And it wasn't. I think the comms we did really well. And I think the main thing has been around the future normal, that things that we thought would be really hard, like forecasters doing night shifts from home, that we would have said, no, we don't accept that, have worked fine, and we'll be more flexible in what we allow people to do, regardless.
Yeah. We've been seeing there's some odd tensions around the health and safety piece. There's I think you sort of alluded to it, there's the physical safety, there's the mental well-being, where actually perhaps the more extrovert people find it really difficult working at home. Then there's also a bit that says home working on your ironing board for 3 months during a pandemic is probably acceptable. But if it comes down to sort of home-based with all the health and safety pieces around that, HSCs might start getting more interested in how companies and organisations are doing that. Have you looked at this at all?
Well, we have a bit, and at the moment, we used to have a policy for people who had a formal home working contract that then said, and you have to set up their office for them, but we only agreed to those on a rare basis. What we've said at the moment is, if you don't have a satisfactory setup at home that is safe for you, we can let you come back. And that's what that interim phase has been. And so, and indeed, not only you may, but you should come back, because that is the provision we're making for you. Not we can buy everybody, all 2,000 staff, a stand-up desk because it's just unaffordable. And not, of course, it's not equitable either, because some people have large houses with plenty of space where they can put that, and some people are in flat chairs, early career with lots of other people, and are in a bed sit. So it is very different for different people. But that's, the DSE has probably taken more management time than anything else. The other thing I would say, one of the interesting groups is we have various different staff support groups, and I've spent quite a bit of time talking to our neurodiversity group, which is a large community in the Met Office, as you'd expect from a STEM employer. And for them, it isn't being at home or being at work, it's uncertainty and out of control. And they hated being sent home with no notice. That really threw them much more than it threw the rest of us. And they begged, and I have agreed, that we would say, well, we couldn't help sending you home in a rush, but we don't have to bring you back in a rush. And I've committed to at least a month's notice if people want it. So if we're going to bring them back. And they would have loved me to say, and I won't send you home in a rush again, but I can't do that because we could get back and then Exeter could have a local lockdown or something. So I can only do what's possible. And staff have tried to get me to say when I think they'll be back. And I had a go at my best guess last week, and then the Prime Minister said something and I was wrong, so I should have stuck with, no, I really don't know any more than the rest of you.
Any more questions from our attendees? No, it's really odd, isn't it, trying to navigate some rather odd messaging at times coming from central government and trying to think, where do we think we need to be in the next little while?
Well, it is. We are civil servants, so I'd like a cracked record. I've been saying we will do what government advice says.
Yeah.
Because we won't second guess what the government advice is when we get it. That's what we do. And the only thing I would say is quite often we get the announcement, mostly on Friday evening, sometimes on a Saturday evening, neither of which is brilliant if you're the leader of a large organisation. And then about Tuesday or Wednesday the following week, we get some really good guidance come out. But that leaves us floundering for a couple of days. So I guess if I was saying anything to central government, it would be about trying to get those two things a bit closer together. Would have helped us, and I'm sure you must have had the same thing. Anyone who's leading an organisation will have, that you get the words first at the press conference, and then the text.
Yeah.
2 days later.
So most people think, Exeter is the place where the Met Office does everything, but it isn't quite true, is it? Because you've got lots of quite remote facilities around the UK. How have they fared?
And the Globe.
And the Globe, yeah.
So we have a few of our own sites, like at Aberdeen, and that's the other thing. I have people in all the devolved administrations with their own different rules. So just because we've been told one thing doesn't mean it's necessarily true in Wales or Scotland. And I have staff in both. I have people around the globe, and then I have people who are lodging on a lot of defence sites. Where I don't own the site, we just follow the site rules. So if they're there, my staff are there, and if they're dispersed, my staff are not there. And on our own, we follow the rules that apply wherever people are. My former chief of staff is on a secondment to Melbourne. He's just been locked down again. So we've got well-being of people to be concerned about all over the world. Wow,
that's a very unusual thing to have happen. Well, we haven't got another question, Penny. It seems to me that the phone has worked pretty well under the circumstances, and it's been really great to hear from you.
Yes, I'm so glad we did manage to make it work. What are the things that I'm proudest about what's been achieved by the Met Office during COVID? Thank you, Tamsin. And I spoke to some of the hydrographic office people, so I know that you were busy taping up your shiny new building the rest of it while we were doing ours. I think I'm really proud that we've kept delivering. I'm proud of the contributions we've made to the national effort, and I'm proud of the way we've enhanced our competence. Actually, I know it's a boring thing, but we just had all our ISO certification for 9001 and 14001 recertified remotely in a 1-month-long audit.
Wow.
During lockdown. And one of the things they fed back was that our communications up and down the organisation were, he called them a shining light, which is the kind of thing auditors don't normally say. And some of that, I think, was down to the new comms we've put in during the lockdown, and the fact that they've been hearing different members of the executive actually talk about what we were prioritising among our strategy and so on. So they'd all heard it recently and were able to refer and link to what they've done. So we were pleased to achieve the ISO certification again, but also I was very proud of that comment.
Brilliant, excellent. So thank you very much indeed, Penny. Really appreciate your time. Thank you for talking to us on the phone.
Yeah, thank you. I breathed a sigh of relief that we didn't let people down a second time. Thank you people for showing up.
And I hope to catch up with you soon at some point in person.
Yes, great.
Yeah, take care, everybody. Thank you so much indeed, Penny. Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Bye.